Hi folks, and welcome to what's probably going to be the season finale for my Nostalgia Chip games. Today we're going to take a look at the first 5 games for the Nintendo Game Boy. Yeah, that's right, the Game Boy. Obviously, this being a handheld and an early one at that, you're not going to be able to see much of anything if I'm going to be playing through this. So, I also have a Super Game Boy, which can be attached to the Super Nintendo. I'm going to be playing through that, so obviously I'm not going to be able to play any of the color Game Boy games. But that's not going to be a problem since I'm only going to be talking about the earliest Game Boy games that I know of right now. So yeah, let's get on to that.
Let's start with the obvious, Super Mario Land. I can't remember exactly which game was the first game that I ever got to play on a Game Boy, but Super Mario Land was one of the first ones, and I'm pretty sure I didn't play Tetris until sometime later on. I remember the shock I felt when I first played Super Mario Land because it played so differently to the Super Mario games on the NES. Sort of, let's say, clunkier, more angular than smooth. And whenever I still play Super Mario Land after a long break, there's still a slight shock of getting back to it because of the slightly awkward controls. But that doesn't mean the game is bad, not at all. It just feels very different, even though the basics of the level design are fairly similar to the first Super Mario Bros. However, each level ends with a small gambling game of sorts, which might earn you some extra lives or other useful things. Also, out of only 12 levels, the game has 2 of them in a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up style, which is a definite peculiarity in the entire library of Mario games. Being as short as Super Mario Land is, the game is rather quickly learned to play through, but similarly to the first Super Mario Bros., the second playthrough is more difficult, and after completing the game for the second time you get to choose your starting level. For a handheld console launch title, Super Mario Land certainly hit the spot and offered some hope and indication as to how much better the subsequent game releases would be. It's as classic a game as you can get for the old Game Boy. Puzzle games were always great to play on handheld consoles, and Kwirk, also known as Puzzle Boy in Japan, was one of the more interesting ones on the Game Boy. Basically, the game is about getting from an entrance of a room to an exit through sets of puzzles involving turnstiles and pushable blocks. Some puzzles can only be solved by using a secondary character, which can be switched to and back again with a select button when such character is available. Kwirk has 3 game modes, each with its own set of rules. The first one, Going Up, is basically the story mode, although there's no storyline as such. But regardless of that, you need to rescue a friend of yours from the maze of 10 floors. The second, Heading Out, is the score mode in which you can choose a number of levels to run through and your performance is scored by the timer. The last one is a VS mode, and it can only be played using a link cable, so I can't say much about it. According to Wikipedia though, you can choose the win conditions from various choices once the contest has started. I remember playing Kwirk on the first day I ever played on a Game Boy, but as I said before, I can't remember whether it was the first game or not. But the memory remained strong with this one, even though I only got to play it that one time before using an emulator, and eventually getting my own Game Boy cartridge earlier this year. With that lasting impression, I can safely promise that it's a game you should check out if you're a puzzle fan like me. Here's another classic puzzle game, Dr. Mario. To be completely honest, I can't remember whether I played this one first on the NES or the Game Boy, but for some reason I think it fits better on the Game Boy. Perhaps it's because of the massive success that Tetris was as a launch title. Nintendo must have thought that they wanted a similar puzzle game with their own mascot to front the game, so it could sell more than the Russian original. Well, I guess you can't underestimate the power of Tetris, and considering how many times we've seen Dr. Mario since the original game, compared to the amount of official Tetris variants, you know where this is going, right? In any case, Dr. Mario is a brilliant little puzzler in the vein of dropping things of 2 blocks worth in varying color combinations and trying to get the colors into rows of 3 or more to blow them up. Of course, columns was there before on the Sega consoles, but Dr. Mario has its own specific kind of feel and structure to it, with all those floating pieces you needed to destroy, etc. Besides, you can't get columns on the original Game Boy, this one you can. Nintendo's very own attempt at creating a worthwhile breakout clone for the Game Boy resulted in Alleyway. It was again one of the launch titles, and most likely due to that, it was one of the games I played when I was being first introduced to the Game Boy. Not because I played it when the game was new, oh no, it was because it was featured in one of those pirate cartridges with 100 games on the same cart. I would say that since Alleyway is a launch title for a handheld console that we didn't really expect much of it at the time it was being released, it did well enough. But even so, this was 1989. Alleyway offered a fairly basic breakout clone for the Game Boy at a time when things like Crackout, Arkanoid, Batty, and Traz had already been out for a couple of years on the 8-bit home computers, showing the path to the future of breakout variants. Alleyway was more like a trip back to the Atari 2600 on hardware that was able to do so much more that it was ridiculous to have something so basic appear on it. Nonetheless, it was a place to start and offered the first example of the genre for the handheld console. It has its place in gaming history, but is it worth playing? Well, if you feel nostalgic about it at all, like I do, then maybe. But only maybe. Another game featured in the aforementioned pirate cart was Konami's side-scrolling mad motocross racing/platforming game, Motocross Maniacs. Out of all these 5 games, this was the one that I got back to on a regular basis when I got the chance, and it was also one of the very first games that I bought for my own Game Boy when I finally decided to buy one about 10 years ago. Although Nintendo's own F1 race was likely the first racing game to be published for the Game Boy, I would hazard a guess and say that this was the first racing game on the platform to appear outside of Japan. And Konami certainly did it the right way by having the speed and strict side-scrolling style of Nintendo's old Excite bike, but getting new fantastic trial biking style elements that we've more recently seen in the Trials series by Redlings. In other words, this game practically brought platforming elements into racing games, and I'd say that if true, more importantly, it might have given some inspiration into the platform designs in Sonic the Hedgehog. Who knows? In any case, Motocross Maniacs is a must-have for Game Boy fans and highly recommendable to every other retro gamer.